Lesson 5.6, Inverse of a Function. Our essential question. How do you find and verify the inverse of a nonlinear function? Standard 5.6, number 4, finding the inverse of a cubic function. So here we have a cubic function where it kind of looks like a bounced chair, and this is a quadratic function. You're going to use the horizontal line test. In Algebra 1, you use the vertical line test to determine if things are functions. Horizontal line test tells us if the inverse is a function. So the horizontal line test, I only pass once, so it would be a function. The inverse is a function. Quadratic. The horizontal line test crosses twice. This tells me that the inverse is not going to be a function. So let's go ahead and consider our first problem. So this is an x to the third parent function, which tells me that I am a cubic. Cubics draw something like this. This will pass the horizontal line test. And if it passes the horizontal line test, that means the inverse is a function. So that's answer number 1. Determine whether it is a function. I did. Now I need to find the inverse. So similar to our other problems, we have y equals 2x to the third plus 1 is our current function. We need to replace x with y's and y's with x's. We need to switch their roles. So this is x equals 2y to the third plus 1. And now we are going to go ahead and we are going to solve for y so we can find its inverse. So subtract 1 from each side. Divide both sides by 2. I have y to the third power. I need to raise the exponent of a 3 to another exponent, so when they multiply each side together, they end up getting 1. 3 times a 1/3 multiplied to a 1, so they will 1 each other out. The left side. This is the third root of x minus 1 all over 2. The right side, 3 times 1/3, 1 each other out, and I'm left with y. So I just found my inverse. G of x is the third root of x minus 1 all over 2. Now I need to graph it. I need to graph my inverse. So we are going to end up using an xy table. Plugging this into my xy table, I'm going to start at the coordinate point -3. And I'm going to plug in a few points so I can find the general shape of this graph. So plugging in -3 to this problem, I get -1.25. Plugging in -2 to this function, I get -1.14. Plugging in -1 to this function, I get -1. Plugging in 0 to this function, I get -0.79. 1 into this function, I get 0. 2 into this function, I get 0.79. 3 into this function, I get 1. So -3, -1.25, -2, -1.25, -1, -1, 0, -7.9, 1, 0, 2.79, 3, 1. So this is the general shape of my g of x function. Our last problem, I'm supposed to consider this function. So I see that this is a x to the third power, which meant it's a cubic, but it's a reflected cubic. So this cubic is going to end up looking like this because it's a reflected cubic. Does this pass the horizontal line test? No matter where I draw a horizontal line, it will pass the horizontal line test. So this passes the horizontal line test. And that tells me if I were to find and graph the inverse, that the inverse would be a function. So determine whether the inverse is a function. It is. I just did. Now I actually want to find the inverse. So we are originally given y equals -x to the third plus 4. We need to switch the x and the y's to prepare for finding the inverse. And now we're going to go ahead and solve for y. I need to raise this to some kind of exponent so that that exponent of a 3 ones out. 3 times a 1/3 will multiply to a 1. So each side is going to get raised to a 1/3. That means that this is actually the third root of negative x plus 4. 3 times 1/3 is 1, so this is a y. So I just found my inverse. My inverse is g of x equals the third root of negative x plus 4. Well, now we need to graph the inverse. And to graph it, we are going to go ahead and use an xy table. And we're going to use just a couple of points. We're going to go a little to the left and a little to the right, so we can get a general idea of the shape. So we're going to use a calculator and plug these values into this function. When we do that, the value negative 3 gives us 1.9. Negative 2 gives us 1.8. Negative 1 gives us 1.7. 0 gives us 1.5. 1 gives us 1.4. 2 gives us 1.2, and 3 gives us 1. So graphing these, negative 3, 1.9, negative 2, 1.8, negative 1, 1.7, 0, 1.5, 1, 1.4, 2, 1.2, and this was a 1, and 3, 1. I see that it's very gradually moving, and it's going to end up looking like this at some point. There are 2 problems left for independent practice. Please do these on your own.